Hi everyone, in this video I'll be painting some Doom-Flayers. So these are two of them. I actually painted 4 in total because I want to try out a big reinforced blob and see how much damage they can do, or maybe they'll just get wiped off the table. So I sub-assembled them. I built the frame first and I put the spikes, the spears on them. The rider's separate and then the wheels are also separate too. So first off I use a black metal and I just paint over the frame area. So I base coated it with Rune Lord brass because I thought it might be an interesting color, but you can actually base coat it any kind of metallic color for this part. It will save a lot of time. So I'm just going through all the area where I can see some frame, and I want to choose like a dark metal first as like the base color, and then I'll leave some areas this Rune Lord brass color, probably the cogs. And to be honest, you won't really see much of this stuff inside, which is quite disappointing. So then I don't glue it, but I put these wheels on. They're not glued at all. They're very snug. I really like this about the kit. And now what I do, once this is all snug and not going to fall off, I hold it by the wheel at the back, and then I use Screaming Bell. And I use this to like paint the outside of the wheels. It saves time, it's not messy. And then once it's dry, I can take them off and then paint the inside as well. Then I use like a kind of a dark metal to paint different parts of the frame. The main goal is to really add a bit of interest and separate all this metal. Otherwise it just looks a bit like a toy, I feel. And again, I'm doing all this and you won't see much of it. But if you don't glue it together, you can always like take it apart and then see inside, if you like that kind of thing. So you can be random, you can pick out areas that you want darker. I picked these parts mainly because you do see them on the outside, when these in between all the big wheels. I didn't glue on the little spikes as well for this reason here, because I want to paint that same color over the frame of the inner wheel as well. Now I use XV88 and I paint this over the wooden part of the wheel. This model really doesn't have much wood. It's very metallic, which really in a way saves time. I've gone for a lighter brown because later on when I add some shades and oils, it actually darkens it down, but you'll still see the, I guess you could say, edge highlight of this lighter brown. I use this copper, cashew copper, just to make it a bit brighter. I didn't want to use gold because that's too bright and too expensive for Skaven, I guess. So then I use this to cover different parts of the engine, the blade, and even the handle as well, where the arm is still on it. Also the trim of these blades, another reason why I didn't glue them in yet. And I also thought, hey, why don't I try and add some more interesting colors to the wheels as well. So I also decided to paint the inside part. Now I'm gluing the models onto the base. Remember, these wheels are not glued together to the main frame, just the one wheel is glued to the base. So now I take the model apart again, and as I said earlier, I paint the inside of this outside wheel with Screaming Bell. Now I've varnished it, so I use streaking grime to go over all the metallic areas. So make sure you varnish it. I varnished it with semi-gloss from a rattle can, or you can use an airbrush, or just make sure it's gloss or semi-gloss. Don't do it as a matte. So I go over it, I make it nice and thick, and I've made sure the gloss is all dry before attempting this. As I said, I painted the wood quite bright, so now I'm going over it with this kind of oil enamel kind of paint. I let that dry now, and while I'm waiting for it to dry, I paint over the flesh areas of the Skaven. It's very nice flesh. I've recently started using this because I've always had a bit of trouble painting Skaven flesh. Well, the smaller models anyway. The giant monsters, I always have some fun experimenting with different paints. But if I'm painting like a million clan rats later on, I think I might use this technique to paint their flesh. And it looks really great on the tail. So I put this contrast paint on the tail. It's a bit thick, which is fine. And then after that, I just kind of move it around, soak up the paint, and it just sits really well. I think this is strangely fulfilling, painting rat tails. So now I use odorless thinner, and I get a tissue and I just dab it, I wipe it, and I start wiping it away towards the crevices. So all this gunk will like either fall into the crevices or off the model onto the tissue. And then what's on the tissue can also be used to kind of tone down some areas, and it just looks fantastic. I think it's so much better than just using Agrax Earthshade or Rakelin Fleshshade. And I've even used it on the rocks, on the stones as well. Just add a bit of grime to it and fill in all the darker areas, the crevices. And even if it's still a bit shiny after this, then you can go over it with like a matte or semi-gloss. What I did, I used semi-gloss for the metals, and then I used a matte varnish on the base itself. So again, I'm using the same technique, and I'm just wiping the model. I'm actually wiping downwards, and I'm not pressing down too hard because I want it to have like a streaky, oily effect to it. I'll probably spend a bit longer on the wooden area just because I want to show more of that brighter brown that I did earlier. So these are all four of them. They're not glued on. The middle part, the frame isn't glued on. But I just wanted to have a look, and I think they look fantastic already. Like after this part, I'm really chuffed with them. Before, they looked a bit plastic, like toys. So I really feel pretty chuffed and motivated to continue this project. So now I'm going to do this wheel with the streaking grime. I waited till after I've glued them together, so then it's easier to hold. Otherwise you'll get really messy hands, and this stuff really smells, really stinks. When it's dry again, then I just wipe it off, and I also I glue in the metal spikes, forks, and paint them silver as well, and then I add the silver on top of it too. For the silver, I actually kind of dry brush it, and I just pick out some of the areas. So it's been chipped, it's been, hit, banged up. And in some areas I'll be a bit heavier. For example, I'll focus on the chain because I want that to be a bit brighter than the rest of it. And again, all these things inside in the middle, you won't really see them, which is a shame because it's so cool. But I still wanted to do it anyway, just in case when you look closer at the model, you can kind of see some of the inner workings, and I thought that was pretty cool. So for this part as well, I wanted to show like it's all scratched and dented and so on. So I did the same thing with the silver. I lightly dry brush over it, and it picks out all the bumps. And then if it's too light, then I just add some more paint on my brush, not too much. And then I now you can see I'm using it to like edge highlight. It's a little bit thicker. And then as the paint dries, or there's less on the brush, then I'll just try some dry brushing. And it's just, you got to feel it, when you're moving the brush around, you start seeing it become less like a strong kind of metallic color. That means it's suitable for dry brushing then. It's a bit of trial and error. You might have some accidental smudges or scratches in the wrong place, but overall it adds a lot of texture, and it's pretty cool. I was pretty chuffed after this part. I was a bit concerned it might be too much, but it actually added a bit more definition. So I use Corex White to paint the arm of the Skaven that's on the machine. And I also take this time to paint the little warp stone that's inside it. And I also, there's like an electric current going on there, like a spark. And then also like the generator is going to have some glowing parts as well. So I just fill in parts of the generator with this Corex White as well. And I'm not sure you can see that well, but I'm kind of edge highlighting part of the frame too, because these are going to have fluorescent paints, and it's a nice base color to, you know, make it bright and pop. Here we go. So they look like this. Now I'm using this flesh shade I used before, the contrast paint, the same one I used on the whole body and the tail. Then I paint the blades silver, just like before. I'm using the same paints, and I'm painting this little stand as well. And now it's fluorescent green. I just paint that over all the white areas. And you noticed before the Skaven was blue, I used Storm Fiend contrast paint to paint his robes. So this is pretty fun for me. I really enjoyed this part. I love adding OSL to my troops, and you know, because it just makes the army look a bit more exciting and interesting to look at. But the thing about these, you don't really see them because they're inside, but you know that they're but actually if you look at some angles, you can kind of see like some green, so it's not too bad. And as I said, you don't need to glue on the outside wheels to the frame. It slots pretty snugly, to be honest. So now I'm just doing some OSL. It's quite thin now, the paint, so I'm just kind of moving it, glazing it around the cogs and anywhere where the light would be touching it. As I said earlier, I use Storm Fiend blue just to paint the robes. I thought this bright colour, to be honest, might make the Skaven stand out a bit more, the rider, because there's a lot of browns and silvers, so I really wanted to make the rider different. You know, I could have added like a dirty, tattered brown cloak or black, but it just wouldn't stand out. I also painted the armor black as well by choice. Normally I like to make it like brass or some kind of dark goldy metal, but I thought that would be too similar to the actual Doom wheel. Sorry, the Doom-Flayer. Is it a Doom wheel? No, it's a Doom-Flayer. So that's why I chose to make it black, as well as the greaves as well. Garrick Sewers, I use this for my fur. So I just pick out the fur on the Skaven, on his head, his chin, his legs, his arms. And now use decomposed flesh to dry brush the ground on the floor, like the stones. And I also use it when there's less paint on the brush now. I'll go to the model and then I'll go over the whole thing. I'll go over the robes, the tail, the face, the fur, the armor, and it's just really effective at edge highlighting everything. And it's not too chalky, so it's not that bad. And if it is a bit chalky on some areas, it kind of adds to the grime of, you know, the dirty Skaven living in the sewers. So now I glue it on with some super glue. Bit tricky, but just be careful. You don't want to get glue in the wrong area or glue your thumb to it. So this is how it looks now. And a bit of dry brushing again with the same color on the wooden area. Now I use AK panel liner brown, and I just pick out all the crevices and even the flesh of the rat, the tail, the wood. And I started off a bit like sparingly, because it does travel quite easily through all the cracks, especially because it's been varnished before. But then towards the end, as I kept going, because I painted 4 of them, I just went a bit to town and I just started adding more and more over the whole model. And it was kind of, and I was like moving it around like a glaze. Yeah, just moving it around. Because the difference with this and like say Agrax Earthshade and so on, the shades from Citadel, they would darken the metal, for example, but this panel lining oil just moves to the crevices, and then you can just easily wipe it off if it's too thick on top of the main surface, so you won't have a risk of things darkening down. And that's why I really love using it, and it really tidies everything up as well. I just used any random bright red to paint the wires inside, and I also used this red to paint the eyeballs of the rats too. I had to Google what color are the rats' eyes, and it's red. I was going to use yellow before, but yeah, it seems they're red officially. And I felt the red kind of helps add a bit of interest to it as well. It's a nice popping color, it's a warm color. And then I go over some of the straps with some browns. You don't have to do this, but I wanted just to add a bit of interest to it. Then I use Troll Slayer orange and have a little dot in the eyes. Cadian flesh now, I just paint all the gums and like the nose, and maybe under the feet you can do just some fleshy areas. Screaming skull for the teeth. And I actually forgot to do the toenails, so then I went back and then I started painting all their nails, which was strangely therapeutic. So I use achromatic blue now, and I kind of glaze over all the blue area. I did this because, I don't know, I found it looked a bit too tattered with my dry brushing before. So then I use this technique I choose a really bright color. So this is a blue color, now I use a brighter blue. And I use that now to kind of tint the actual, like it's like I dry brush a kind of a white color, and that will go over that and change the color a bit to like a lighter blue. Then I use Baffaroff blue, and then I mix it heavily with water. And what I do then, I just focus around the middle part first, and I push the brush down, and so it all like comes out, all the liquid comes out, all the paint flies out. And then what I do then, I just move it around them. I just kind of push it around the areas and push it into all the cracks, and maybe add a bit of like leakage, so I kind of drag my brush a bit, and I'll just like go around all the spikes as well, just where it would, you know, keep gather. So this is how they look. There's 4 of them. They look very similar, but that's not the end of the world, I guess. And they were fun to paint. I recommend these models if you want Skaven, and they're great and they don't take long at all, providing you can subassemble and so on. So if you like this video, please give a thumbs up, leave a comment if you have any suggestions, and I hope to see you soon. Take care everyone, bye.